Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTox here, and I'm back with our breakdown for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 4. Unfortunately, Trev's not going to be able to be with us today. He's very busy throughout this week, so I thought I would sit down and give you my thoughts on every single scene of this episode. First of all, I'm going to start off with Cersei, and we see a scene with her and Tycho who represents the Iron Bank, and he's pretty much complimenting her, saying that she's efficient, and she's redefining what it means to be effective. And Cersei did tell Tycho that the gold is on the way, and we actually find out at the end of the episode that the gold has arrived at King's Landing. And Tycho promises that the Iron Bank will have Cersei's best interests when the gold arrives. And first of all, I want to say that the show has done a really good job to make us feel like Cersei actually stands a chance fighting against Daenerys. With the development of scorpions and her large army, and Daenerys' 2 defeats already, Cersei seems like she has the upper hand, but coming with the fight at Highgarden, and with the burning of all of the food and resources, it kind of knocked Cersei down a peg, but she still got the gold. And because of that gold, I think it can balance out the fight even more. Because this will allow Cersei to upkeep her resources, her army, her fleet, and keep building weapons such as the scorpions that can take out dragons. Another thing I want to quickly address is the House in Black and White. I believe that the Faceless Men are tied to the economy of Braavos, and the Iron Bank relies on the Faceless Men, etc. And I believe that after this interaction, when Tycho gets his gold back, he sees Cersei as a really good candidate to invest in. He's bet against her before with Stannis, but he can never get the upper hand against the Lannisters. And with Cersei completing her huge payment back to the Iron Bank, it proves that she is a person worth following. So I think they're going to spare no expense to ensure that Cersei sits on the Iron Throne at the end of this, because she has proved that she has the Iron Bank's best interests. And because of this, I think that we're going to see Tycho go to the House in Black and White and speak to Jaqen H'ghar and give him either Jon Snow's name or Daenerys Targaryen's name. And I think this would be a really interesting plot point. I understand that we only have 9 episodes left, but this could be a good plot point for the next season. While Daenerys and Jon are fighting the war to the north, Cersei's still trying to secure her place on the throne. We know who the Faceless Men are, we know what they're capable of, and this is where Arya could be really successful. She knows their training, and she would be very important to defend Daenerys and Jon because she knows their techniques and she would be the best person to combat them. But moving on to Winterfell, we see Littlefinger approach Bran, and he ends up giving her cat's paw. And he's talking about Catelyn and how he loved her and how he would do anything for Bran. But Littlefinger says it must have been strange for Bran returning back to a world of chaos. And then Bran says chaos is a ladder, which hints at so much going forward, and it raises a lot of questions. The first question is, how much does Bran know? We know that he sees everything. He's seen the past and the present. He sees everything and everyone. But the question is that can he put the pieces together? When he arrived, he said he needs to learn how to see better. Everything surrounding him is pieces and fragments. So are all these pieces and fragments together and in line for Littlefinger? Can Bran accurately tell and understand what Littlefinger has done to his family? Because he's responsible for killing Jon Arryn, he betrayed Ned Stark, he was putting the Starks against the Lannisters, and he pretty much started the war for the 5 Kings. But my personal opinion is that Bran knows exactly what Littlefinger has done. He knows everything that he has done and that he has betrayed his family. However, I believe that this touches on an even more in-depth issue, is that Bran is no longer Brandon Stark. What made him Bran Stark was his memories, his past, his character. But it makes sense that he no longer is Bran Stark anymore. He's just a shell of a person who sees everything. He's seen every aspect of what's happened to Jon Snow. He's seen everything that's happened to Daenerys Targaryen. He's seen everything that's happened to every character in every point of history. And those are all of his memories. Bran Stark is now just one of the memories of the many that he's been seeing. Because of this, he doesn't want to seek vengeance or anything else like that, because he isn't connected to the Stark name or the Stark family or himself anymore. And we see this with Meera. When she says goodbye, Bran doesn't have an emotional connection with her. He just says thank you and bye, and Meera is noticeably upset because of everything that she's done for him. And Bran does say that Brandon Stark has faded. It's just a memory of the many things that he sees, because he remembers so much more now. And I think that this was so well executed. I'm glad that they really fleshed out Bran, and they explained why he's like this very well, in my opinion. And it makes sense to me that Bran is now going to be consumed about the threat to the north. And he's going to be stopping at nothing to ensure that the Night King is defeated. And we know that his primary mission right now is to speak to Jon Snow. So we will see how that connection happens. I also want to draw attention to Samwell Tarly, because Bran is the one seeing in the weirwood tree and he sees everything, but he has no way to prove that his visions are real. And I believe that Sam is the perfect candidate for Bran to summon back to Winterfell to help interpret his messages. And also Bran's knowledge that he has learned in Old Town will be very useful up in the north. And I think that Sam and Bran are going to have a huge relationship going forward, because I personally believe that Sam plays a vital role in the long night to come. Even when he killed a White Walker, there were crows warning Sam. They were warning him to run. The weirwood tree was watching him. And I think that Bran had a strong presence when Sam killed that White Walker. But then we get a look at Arya. And I found it really interesting because Bran looks out the window after talking to Mira, almost that he knew that Arya was watching Winterfell. We see her arrive and speak to the guards, and they do not let her in. It's very reminiscent of in Season 1, when Arya isn't let into King's Landing because she looks like a boy. So I thought that this was an interesting retelling. But what I pulled from this scene is that Winterfell is so much different than Arya even can grasp anymore. She asks for Luwin, she asks for Sir Roderick, she asks for Jon Snow. And every person who she wanted to see or expected to see is not there. So I believe this is an extremely different Winterfell than Arya wanted to see or expected to see. So she sneaks away from the guards and gets into the crypts of Winterfell and is staring at the statue of Ned Stark. And this is where we see Sansa and Arya reunite, and I thought it was really well done. I think they have both been through a lot, and they did have a little awkward interaction, which I actually enjoyed, and it makes a lot of sense. The characters can't even grasp what they've been through. Sansa thinks that Arya's list is a joke. She thinks it's ridiculous because she doesn't know her skills as an assassin. And I'm sure Arya doesn't know that Sansa's been grounded through all of the tragedy that's happened in her life. And that she's not just a privileged lady, she's earned her spot as being a really good leader. But it makes a lot of sense because these characters have experienced so many different things and they still cannot relate on the same level. Even more so now. So I liked how they shared a common purpose in talking about their father and how the statue doesn't even look like him. But then Sansa does tell Arya that Bran is home, and she gives her a look as if he is very different. And then we see Arya and Bran reunite. And I found it a little interesting here because when Arya hugged Bran, he did hug a bit back, and he never hugged Sansa. And this could be obviously over-analysis, but he was very wooden around Sansa. I just wonder if there is a reason why he could potentially be angry with her. Because he does see everything. Maybe he saw the fact that Sansa defended Littlefinger when he in fact killed Lysa Arryn. Maybe he sees her motives or ambitions and jealousy towards Jon Snow. But I believe regardless, Bran has warmed up more to Arya than Sansa, and I think it would be interesting if they explored why. And we get a look at Bran's ability, because he talks to Arya and says, I saw you at the crossroads, I didn't know if you're going to go to King's Landing or come back to Winterfell. This does show that Bran can't really see the future, he can only see the present and the past, but he can see everything. And he does mention that Cersei is on her list, and I think that reaffirms to Sansa that both Bran can see everything, and it proved that Arya has more than just a list, that she's really good at what she does. And then Bran gives the dagger to Arya, and obviously Sansa is a bit upset because first of all, she understands Littlefinger and she knows that he wouldn't give Bran that dagger if it didn't push a particular motive. But Bran doesn't care, and he gives the dagger to Arya anyway. And this just makes me wonder, Bran knows that Arya is an amazing fighter, a master assassin. And this is a Valyrian steel dagger, and it almost seems like he gave it to Arya to fulfill something that he wants. Since it's Valyrian steel, it would naturally be a great weapon against the White Walkers. Arya is a great fighter and it seems like a natural fit. But I believe that in Season 8 we're going to see more from Arya than just fighting White Walkers. I believe that Sansa's going to realize that Arya is a big asset to her. And they explored in episode 1 of this season. Sansa said that there is no wall between them and Cersei and she will stop at nothing to defeat her enemies. And I believe that the threat to the north is going to be looming and Daenerys isn't going to be able to claim King's Landing and she will leave Cersei at King's Landing. And this is from the plot leak. And I believe in Season 8, Sansa could use Arya to go back to King's Landing to try and fulfill her list and protect the north because I believe Cersei will be bulking up her forces as the White Walkers are marching south. But moving on, we get a scene with the Starks walking through the grounds of Winterfell and I thought it was a really great scene to finally see all the Starks together, and we're almost reacting with everyone else. We see Brienne and Pod share a scene. We see Littlefinger watching them in the background. And he does look a bit concerned, because he wants the Stark children reliant on him. But in this scene, it very much looks like they're reliant on each other, and that they don't need him. And the most interesting part about this scene is that while Littlefinger is watching them, there are crows in the background. And I think that's a really fun nod, because Bran is always around. There are eyes everywhere, and in this case, eyes are behind Littlefinger. And I think that's really foreshadowing his demise. He's really sneaky and he's really good at political games, but he can't avoid the magic, the majestic. He can't help that Bran sees everything, and that will most definitely be to his demise. Or maybe it'll just be Sansa outsmarting him, I'm not sure. But then we see a really cool fight scene between Arya and Brienne, and I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was really important to show, because we finally get to see Arya use the skills that she has learned from the Faceless Men. And I thought it was a nice nod for Arya to say that no one taught her how to fight like that. And it just proves that she's going to be a dangerous character with a Valyrian steel sword, against both the people on her lists as well as the White Walkers. And this whole fight scene, Sansa is watching, and she looks almost upset and concerned. From what I bring from that is that she's realizing that Bran and Arya and herself, they have all gone through all of these different experiences, and that they're more than Sansa could ever understand. But I do think that Sansa's going to start to see potential in Arya, that she can use Arya to kill strategically, and I think Arya would be down to do that to protect her family. And while she leaves, Littlefinger sits and stares at Arya, and from this I gather that he is a bit annoyed that he sees Arya with the dagger. He specifically gave it as a gift to Bran in good faith, because I think in his point of view, when he gave that gift to Bran, he didn't know that he had no intention to be Lord of Winterfell. And he did learn that information, and that's great. But I think it's just a bit of a shock to him that Arya now has the dagger. And he just doesn't have strong footing with the Stark children. Because Bran did say chaos is a ladder. He could potentially know so much more about Littlefinger. And the fact that Bran didn't accept that gift and he gave it to somebody else, to me almost proves that he doesn't have Littlefinger's best interests and he doesn't care. And that makes Littlefinger uneasy. So it will be interesting to see what he does next. So moving on to Dragonstone, we start off with Daenerys and Missandei talking about Grey Worm. I like this scene because it showed a bit of positivity amongst all the war. But then Jon calls her to the cave, and then she leaves all of her Dothraki behind, which me shows that she trusts Jon. They go into the caves, and Jon states that this is all the dragon glass that they need. One thing I want to point out in this scene is that there's a new score, a new melody. And I'll let you listen to it right now. And I think that this score could almost be Jon and Daenerys' score going forward. For me, this score is very reminiscent of You Know Nothing, a song that was made for Ygritte and Jon Snow. It kind of starts the same, but it goes off into its own melody, and I think it symbolizes Jon and Daenerys' relationship. But then Jon shows her all of the markings from the Children of the Forest as well as the First Men, and it shows that they actually fought together to defeat their common enemy, the White Walkers. And this scene did one main thing, is that it confirmed that the White Walkers get their symbols from the Children of the Forest. And I think this increasingly adds to the thought that the White Walkers are a lot more than just a weapon of mass destruction. I believe that they're a whole society. If you look at their clothing, they wear an arrow, which seems like it's significant because the Hound sees an arrowhead in the flames, and that's what the White Walkers wear on their chest. We also see them in packs of 4 when they are attacking, as well as they send one individual White Walker with no armor on to pick up babies, Craster's babies. As well as the use of symbols, I think it's well enough to say that we're going to learn more about the White Walkers going forward, and that they're a lot more than a weapon. And I was looking into the symbols, and I have one really tinfoil thought, and I just wanted to throw it out there. There's a lot of circle imagery, and what I think about when I see a circle is time. It's in a constant loop, and it always runs into each other. If you look at Bran under the weirwood tree, it signifies a circle. You can't change the past, but Bran's actions affected the future. It's a constant loop that cannot be changed, and it cannot be messed with. In Bran's circle, he was expected to warg into Hodor, which caused Hodor to say his own name for the rest of his life. And that is a constant loop that cannot be unbroken. And I think that could be a part of the symbol of the spiral as well as the circle with the stick in it. And I also want to point out we've seen a lot of symbolism with Jon and Daenerys, both rising up in the middle of a crowd, a circular crowd of people, and I think that is also relevant here. I also want to point out that I thought that Jon and Daenerys were a little flirty here. They showed their chemistry on screen, and I think that will end up paying off later in the show. I personally am not one of those people who say, oh, if Jon and Daenerys get married, it's too fan fiction-y. I think it could happen, but that doesn't mean that they're going to end up together at the end of the show. I just think it is the most strategic thing that they could possibly do. As I've said over and over again, Daenerys is realizing over and over again that she is pretty much an equal with Jon. She's not better than him. And she keeps trying to out-alpha him and be the dominant one and get Jon to bend the knee, but she's realizing that's not going to happen. And I think she really needs the North, and she really respects Jon. And that puts her in a difficult position, because she wants to rule the Seven Kingdoms, but Jon will not back down, and she respects him, so I think marriage is the ultimate solution. And we get a hint of that here in this scene. Jon tells her that they cannot defeat them without the White Walkers, and Daenerys says that she will help fight with him if he bends the knee. And Jon made it very clear that his people will not accept a Southern ruler. But I found it very interesting because Daenerys told him that survival is more important than his pride. And this harkens all the way back to Mance Rayder, when Jon tried to get Mance to bend the knee. And Jon told him to put aside his pride. And Mance Rayder said, fuck pride. I don't need pride. And if you don't understand why I'm not bending the knee, then you never will. And I think Jon has come full circle and he completely understands Mance Rayder's perspective. But then when Jon and Daenerys come out of the cave, Tyrion is standing there with news on Casterly Rock. And Daenerys is naturally frustrated because Cersei took all the food from the Reach. So Tyrion suggests to bring Grey Worm back and use their remaining ships to take the Dothraki to the mainland. And Daenerys immediately wants to go to King's Landing right now with all 3 dragons and take it over, but Jon kind of talks her off the cliff. And he says that he never believed in dragons. And people could potentially believe that she is the one who can make impossible things happen. But Jon does state if she burns cities, then she's no better than everyone else who has ruled. So I believe that she really takes Jon's advice to heart here. And I think this is almost the birth of a theory that I think is going to end up happening. And I realize that we only have 9 episodes left, but I think it would be a good political spin to put on the show going forward. And that is when Jon gave Daenerys advice. Varys seemed relatively impressed. And I think Varys has made it very clear that he fights for the people and he's not going to blindly be loyal to someone. And I think every title Daenerys has, Jon combats it. And he's known for bringing people together as well. And in this situation, he seems like the wise one. And I wonder if it comes out if Jon is truly a Targaryen, and just by the way that he is, I think that Varys could almost switch allegiances and support Jon behind the scenes, and try and push him to rule over Daenerys. And I think it's interesting because Jon has proven that power resides with him. Everywhere he goes, people flock to Jon for his support. He doesn't want it, but he gets it anyway. Whereas Daenerys had to fight for everything that she got, and she's in the same situation in Westeros. But then in another scene, we get Jon and Davos, and they're talking about Daenerys. And Davos is wondering if Jon is interested. And Jon made it very clear that he doesn't have time for that. Funny joke about Jon staring at her good heart. But then they talk to Missandei, and she tells him why she follows Daenerys. And this whole scene to me was for Jon to realize that Daenerys isn't just the aggressive person that he met when he walked into the throne room. People actually support her, and she's kind-hearted, and I think that was important for Jon to realize. And I think Jon really respects that, and I think that could result in him treating Daenerys a bit differently going forward. But then Theon arrives at the shores of Dragonstone, and Jon and Theon share a scene. It's handled pretty much the way that I would expect it to be handled. But the one thing I want to pluck from this scene is that Theon makes it very clear that he came back to see the Queen and ask for her help to get Yara back. And I find this so interesting because Theon is not confident in himself at all, and he wants Yara to rule the Iron Islands. But going forward in this show, I don't know where she is. She's with Euron Greyjoy, and I don't know if he's going to be torturing her. I don't know where he's holding her. And I hope that we don't get a mission of them trying to save Yara. I hope they move on from that plot point. So we will see if it becomes a plot point where Theon tries to save Yara, and in doing that, he may find himself as a ruler. And that's the arc I do want. I think Theon has been through a huge arc, and he's paid the iron price for everything. And I think with a bit of a push, he can truly become the king of the Iron Islands. But then Jon says that the Queen is gone, and I think it was a really good surprise for the audience to get that. Because Jon was probably alone on Dragonstone for a week or two while Daenerys was out traveling to Highgarden. And then we snap to Highgarden. And before the fighting starts, we get a scene between Jamie and Bronn, and everyone's escorting all the carriages to King's Landing, and Jamie gives Bronn a bag of gold. And Jamie's obviously upset. He doesn't want to talk about Lady Olenna. And I found it interesting how he said to Bronn he's going to save his confessions for the High Septon, and Bronn points out that there isn't one left. And that harkens right back to Cersei, and it's another reminder for Jamie that his sister is pretty much a disease. And I think he is. Every interaction he has, he's getting chipped away at the idea of supporting Cersei. And I think it's going to come full circle. And then the scene ends with Randall and Dick and Tarly telling them that they are loading the harvest. And then in the next scene, we get some vital information before the war starts, that Randall states that the gold has finally made it to King's Landing, which is absolutely huge. And it gives Cersei a huge upper hand in getting a loan from the Iron Bank. And this could be vital in helping her win the war. And on top of that, Jamie ends up speaking to Dickon. Bronn ends up laughing his ass off, which I thought was a great scene. And they pretty much talk about Dickon's first time pretty much being in a fight. And I think it was well handled, and I think it was good character development, I guess. I think they're trying to build up Dickon's character before they kill him, because I don't see him bending the knee to Daenerys. But then we will see. But then we get to the action set piece, and there's not much to analyze, but all I gotta say is, it was unbelievable. Everything about it. I love the way how Bronn heard the Dothraki, and just the panic everyone was put in. And you see the Lannisters legitimately terrified seeing the Dothraki come in to them. And then you see panic. Bronn wants Jamie to go to King's Landing because he's not a fighter. He's the Lord Commander. And I love this because it was almost a huge character moment for Bronn. This whole action set piece really showed us where he was and what he has become. And I think him and Jamie really do have a friendship, and he wants Jamie to leave. But I loved it when Jamie said they'd hold him off, and then you hear the dragon. And then I just got to say to the music was unbelievable. The score for this season is unbelievable. But then we see all these explosions, and she's destroying all of the carriages on Drogon, which I found interesting because earlier she wanted the food, but in this action sequence, she's burning it all anyway. So maybe it's because she's just angry, but I feel like there was no strategical attack there. Granted, I realize she's on a big dragon, so that might not have been possible. But I loved all of it. Bronn's journey to the Scorpion, and he has to choose between the gold and getting to the Scorpion. It was almost a choice between him being a sellsword, what is best for him, versus what is best for the whole or the war. And Kevin from the Bat Productions made a great analogy saying that this scene was Bronn turning from a sellsword to a soldier. And now he's a true friend. He could have grabbed the gold and ran, but he decided to stick by and fight with his friend Jamie. But I love the one shot with Bronn. It was chaotic, it was intense, and the one shot of Drogon flying over Bronn was unbelievable, as well as the one shot of Drogon over Daenerys burning all the carriages. I thought it was really well done. And it also touched on the emotion. We got Jamie looking at his soldiers being burned, and we saw that the effect that had on him. And we also got a great perspective from Tyrion. He was watching in the background, almost upset, seeing his own people, in a way, being killed by Daenerys. And it's tough for Tyrion because he wants Daenerys to rule, but it's hard for him to see his own house being destroyed. And then I really felt it when Bronn got the Scorpion and shot Drogon. I legit was concerned for Drogon, and it was hard to watch. And then there was that moment where Jamie decided to try and kill Daenerys, which was intense, and I loved seeing Tyrion's point of view. Keep telling him to turn around, you fucking idiot, turn around. And I just thought it was a great moment for Tyrion because he doesn't want either situation to happen. He doesn't want Daenerys to die, and he doesn't want Daenerys to kill Jamie. So it was a terrible situation for Tyrion, but I thought it was really well done. And then Bronn jumps in and saves Jamie, which I thought was unbelievable. They made it very clear that he's sinking to the bottom because of all the heavy armor he's wearing. And Bronn never wears armor. He doesn't like armor. So Bronn will be able to swim and he'll be able to float. So I think Bronn's going to be the one to get Jamie out of this. I think we're going to see right at the beginning of next episode, we're going to see Bronn take off Jamie's armor and bring him up to the surface, and then we'll see what happens from there. I also loved with the sinking shot that it's very reminiscent of Tyrion sinking in Old Valyria in Season 5 when he's dragged underwater. And I thought that was a nice nod. But that is it for my breakdown, everybody. Please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'll be back with a live stream on Saturday at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, so look out for that. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.